And the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time the trumpets were sounding. That was interesting, verse 10. But Joshua had commanded the people, do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. So he had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the people returned to camp and spent the night there. Joshua got up early the next morning, and the priests took up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets went forward, marching before the ark of the Lord, and blowing the trumpets. The armed guard went ahead of them, the rear guard followed the ark of the Lord, while the trumpets kept sounding. So on the second day, they marched around the city once and returned to the camp. And they did this for 6 days. Okay? So we're making progress here. On the 7th day, they got up at daybreak. They marched around the city 7 times in the same manner, except that on that day they circled the city 7 times. The 7th time around, when the priest sounded the trumpet blast, Joshua commanded the people, shout, for the Lord has given you the city. The city and all that is in it are to be devoted to the Lord. Verse 18, keep away from the devoted things so that you will not bring about your destruction. Okay, verse 19, listen, this is important. The articles of silver, gold, bronze, and iron are sacred to the Lord. They must go into the treasury. So when the trumpet sounded, the people shouted. The sound of the trumpet, when the people gave a loud shout, the wall collapsed, and every man charged in, and they took the city. Their first victory in their new home. A weird kind of a victory. A crazy kind of a victory. Silly orders. I mean, it's easy for us to say, well, yeah, it's obvious. You just obey what God says, and the walls come down. Come on, what's the problem? Easy for us to say several thousand years later, reading it in print. These are silly orders. This is a crazy thing that God is asking them to do. Anybody ever had that happen? Felt like God asked you to do something really odd, off the wall? Let me ask you this. Is it really crazy if, number 1, God is the one that's telling you to do it? And number 2, if it works? Yeah. I mean, who cares how crazy it is, right? If it's God saying to do it and it's going to work, well, that's not crazy. That makes sense. Sometimes it makes no sense, but I want to tell you that it's not ours to understand many times. It's ours just to obey. Okay? It's ours to obey. 1 Corinthians 1, he says, God will use the foolish things to confound the wise, to confound the mighty. I'll use foolish things. I'll tell you to do it. You know what? I will tell you to, I'll tell you to give the first 10% of your income and then just sacrifice that to the Lord and to the kingdom, to the church. I'll give you that crazy directive. Silly, that silly order, that silly request. Are you kidding? I can't make it on 100%. How in the world do you expect me to make it on 90? Willingness is understanding the teaching about tithes and giving. I understand that. That's such a, I've read that before. It's that thing in Malachi. I've read that. You give your first fruits, the 10th, the tithe, to the Lord and see if He won't bless. That is such a neat scripture. Willingness, here's that. Obedience. Obedience writes the check. It's not easy. When I felt first being called to pastoring, I did music stuff for years. I led choirs and orchestras and wrote music for orchestras and stuff, and as most of you know. And so, but man, I'm telling you, I just, I had a couple pastors give me a couple opportunities to start to kind of do some teaching and Bible studies and stuff like that, maybe on some Wednesday nights and everything. So it was in Santa Cruz, that we spent a year down in Santa Cruz. It was in Santa Cruz that really I felt like the Lord saying, this is the thing to do. This is the way to go. Besides the fact that I felt that if I ever had to do another 4th of July extravaganza, I was just going to quit the whole thing. But really felt like that, that God was calling us to that. And so then what do you do? What do you do about that? I mean, if God's calling you to move on to, kind of expand or change your ministry, whatever it is. We're in Santa Cruz. We're not up here around where all of our base is, and we're down in Santa Cruz, California. And so miraculously, okay, so we start, pursuing this, praying about it, and because we're like, okay, how does this work? I'm not an associate pastor somewhere learning about pastoring and everything. How does this work? So as God does, he got some circumstances together. Some chance encounters, with my folks and people in St. John and in Eastern Washington. And these things, it was clearly the Lord, directing circumstances to provide a place for us to go pastor. It's just so obvious. And so when we finally made the connection and they call us up, say, man, why don't you come and talk to us and let's see if we can put this thing together, And so we're excited. And then they call later and they say, well, we'd love to have you come up. A little bit of a cultural shift from Santa Cruz, California to St. John, Washington. But they said this to us. We want you to come and we can pay you $600 a month. 2 little kids. We can pay you $600 a month. So that was back, 99-ish, somewhere around in there. So, and we were on staff at the church. I think in that day, I think we were making $32,000 a year. Not a lot of money, especially in Santa Cruz, but whatever, the Lord's faithful. But they said $600 a month we can pay. I'm like, wow, okay. That call is becoming a little fuzzy. It was one of these kind of marching around the wall kind of 6 times. That's a crazy kind of a order there. God wasn't ordering us to go. He's given us the opportunity, of course. And willingness, I think the willingness is hearing. Willingness is hearing. Willingness, says, I hear that. I hear that opportunity to go pastor in St. John. I'm hearing that. I'm also hearing the pay. I'm hearing this. Willingness is hearing this. Obedience is doing. Willingness is hearing, and obedience is doing. I think of as we wrap it up, I think of Abraham and Isaac. Because we think, Abraham believed. Abraham believed, and it was credited to him for righteousness. Galatians says. Willingness is hearing, obedience is doing. And it says that Abraham believed, and because of that, he was called righteous. And he's relating that. Paul in the Galatians, he said, that's you guys.